I was standing in the bank lobby, my purse tucked beneath my arm, the fluorescent lights humming above me, when my own brother, my only sibling, looked me straight in the eye and said the words that froze the air between us. "Margaret, I just need your signature. One signature. Don't start acting like I owe you something." He slid the loan documents across the desk as if they were nothing more than a birthday card. A $60,000 loan application lay open, my name printed in bold letters beside the word cosigner. My heart thudded once, slow and heavy. This moment should never have existed. Not after everything he'd said. Not after the months he spent laughing at me behind my back, calling me gullible, calling me paranoid, mocking my legal bills after my divorce. Bills he told everyone were ridiculous expenses for someone too dramatic to move on with her life. I had swallowed the humiliation. I had forgiven the snide comments. I had even tolerated the silence that followed when I asked him for emotional support, or even just a visit. But this was different. He needed me. And he needed me badly. I watched him tap the pen against the desk, impatience flickering across his face. "Come on," he said. "It's not that complicated. I'd do it for you." Except he wouldn't have. And we both knew it. I hadn't yet opened my mouth. I hadn't yet said yes or no. But the walls between us, built from years of small betrayals and one recent, devastating one, were shifting, trembling, preparing to reveal something buried too long. The banker stepped away to make copies, leaving us alone. My brother leaned closer. "Maggie," he whispered sharply, "don't make this a thing. Don't start with your overthinking." That was the moment my decision crystallized, a cold line of clarity through my chest. Because what he didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that I had come prepared. Prepared with documents. Prepared with truth. Prepared with a calm, quiet resolve that had taken months to sharpen. I hadn't forgiven him for what he'd done. I hadn't forgotten, either. He thought I was here to help him. He thought I would fold like I always had. But he had no idea that I already held the one piece of information that would change everything. One that would turn this bank appointment into the beginning of his silent downfall. As he drummed his fingers on the table, waiting for my compliance, I gently placed the folder I'd brought onto the desk between us. "Before I sign anything," I said softly, "we need to discuss what you did last spring." His smile froze. His hand stopped tapping. His eyes narrowed, calculating, uncertain. And for the first time in our adult lives, he realized he might not be the one in control. And that was when he asked, barely above a whisper, "What do you think you know?" My name is Margaret Delaney, and at 62 years old, I've lived long enough to recognize the sound of a trap closing. Not a metal bear trap or anything violent. Just the soft, nearly polite click that happens when someone finally shows you who they really are. For most of my life, I've been a woman who made peace instead of trouble. A retired English teacher, a widow of 8 years, a quiet presence at family gatherings. I raised one daughter, Elise, mostly alone while my husband traveled for work. I taught my students to respect words, to understand that every sentence we speak reveals the truth we're either too afraid or too proud to admit. I believed stories made people kinder. I believed time softened our edges. But the past few years have taught me something else entirely. Some people do not soften. They sharpen. My brother, Daniel, is 5 years younger than I am. He has always possessed a certain reckless charm, quick to laugh, quick to gamble, quick to assume the world owed him a little more than the rest of us. Our childhood was marked by his stumbles and my attempts to shield him from the consequences. My mother used to say, "You're the responsible one, Maggie. He needs you." Those words burrowed deep. Too deep. After my husband's death, when I went through a drawn-out legal battle over property rights, I turned to Daniel for emotional support. Not money. Not labor. Just companionship, someone to occasionally sit with me while I untangled bank accounts, estate documents, and legal jargon far more complex than I'd ever faced. Instead, he mocked me. Quietly at first, then more boldly. Whispering to cousins that I was getting ripped off by lawyers, rolling his eyes whenever I tried to explain why the bills were necessary. The worst part was hearing from a friend weeks later that he'd joked at a barbecue about me, spending a fortune just to keep imaginary enemies away from my front porch. He made my grief into comedy. He made my struggle into gossip. And I, naive and wounded, said nothing. But the thing about grief is that it teaches you patience, and patience teaches you observation. I watched him. I listened. And I began to understand that Daniel's need to tear me down came from one thing. He believed he could. Now, sitting in that quiet bank lobby with him breathing impatience toward me, I felt the shift inside myself, a steadiness like the setting of stone. I was no longer the sister who would bend for him. I was no longer the woman who accepted mockery as affection. I was simply myself, older, wiser, and no longer willing to let someone else author my story. But Daniel had no idea just how prepared I was. And when I opened that folder between us, he would finally learn. Our family gatherings were always small, cluttered affairs, potluck dishes, mismatched chairs, too much nostalgia poured like gravy over uncomfortable silences. My mother had been the glue. My father, the quiet background presence. When they passed, 10 years apart, the elastic that held Daniel and me close enough to call ourselves a family began to stretch thin. Elise, my daughter, had always sensed the unspoken tension. She once described Daniel as a charming storm cloud, something beautiful to look at but dangerous to walk beneath for too long. She was right. He had a way of making you feel chosen, important, until something better caught his attention. After my husband died, Daniel swooped in with dramatic concern. He brought casseroles, insisted on helping with small repairs, called every other day. For a moment, I believed grief had matured him. But as soon as he learned that the estate was complicated, that I needed lawyers, accountants, and a year-long paper trail, his compassion soured. "You're letting them swindle you," he'd say. "You're not built for this kind of thing. You should have let me handle it." But when I asked him to join one meeting with my lawyer, just one, he cancelled the morning of, claiming he had something more urgent. Later, I learned his urgent task had been tickets to a baseball game. Still, I held my tongue, kept the peace, pretended nothing bothered me. That was my pattern, smoothing the surface even when the water beneath was thrashing. What Daniel didn't know was that my silence wasn't ignorance. It was sadness. A grief not for my husband, but for the brother I had spent decades protecting, believing someday he would grow into the man he pretended to be. Then came spring. Then came the betrayal. The one I discovered too late. The one that cut deeper than his mockery of my legal bills. And as the bank minutes ticked by, I knew Daniel sensed the shift in me, even if he didn't yet understand its cause. He straightened in his chair. "Maggie," he said slowly, "if this is about the jokes, you're taking things way too personally." He still believed it was about the jokes. He still believed I was the same sister he could nudge aside with a smirk. He had no idea how wrong he was. Because the betrayal wasn't spoken. It was written. And I had brought the proof. Last spring, while finalizing the paperwork for my husband's estate, I received a call from my attorney's office. A routine update, or so I thought. Instead, my lawyer's tone was tight, cautious. "Margaret, did you authorize someone else to access your escrow account?" My stomach dropped. Escrow accounts were sacred, temporary vaults of money held between parties during property settlements. The funds were monitored, protected, documented to the decimal. Nothing moved without my signature. "No," I said. "No one else has access." "Why?" She hesitated. "Because someone attempted to withdraw from it. Someone with the last name Delaney." The room tilted. My breath stilled. There were only 2 Delaneys left in our family line. My lawyer didn't say the name, but the implication hung in the air like a foghorn. When I hung up the phone, I called Daniel. He didn't answer. I texted. Silence. Hours later, he finally responded with a casual, "Busy today." "What's up?" I didn't confront him then. Something in me resisted, some instinct telling me to watch before striking. So I asked my lawyer to send me every access attempt, every signature, every scrap of information connected to the attempted withdrawal. 2 days later, the documents arrived. And there, in black ink that wavered just enough to betray its forgery, was my name signed on the request line. Except it wasn't my handwriting. It wasn't even a good imitation. And at the bottom of the page, in the applicant information, was Daniel's phone number. He had tried to siphon money from the escrow account without my knowledge. Money that wasn't even mine to touch freely. Funds tied to legal obligations, pending settlements, tax allocations. If he had succeeded, I would have been liable for fraud. Not him. Me. When I finally confronted him, days later, heart pounding, he denied everything. Accused me of being paranoid. Suggested my lawyer was incompetent. Told me, laughing, that nobody uses escrow accounts anyway. But I had the documents. I had the timestamps. I had his signature, one he'd sloppily repeated across decades of birthday cards. He realized then that I knew. And instead of apologizing, he went silent for months. No calls. No visits. No explanations. He left me to untangle the financial mess alone. I spent thousands in legal fees confirming the account was secure, repairing the damage, documenting the attempted fraud in case it ever resurfaced. Daniel knew. And he did nothing. So when he called months later, desperate, chirping a rehearsed brightness into the phone, "Hey sis, got a quick favor to ask." I listened in silence. I already knew what this favor would cost him. Because the moment I learned about the forged signature, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would never again let my brother endanger my life, my home, or my peace. And that promise was about to be fulfilled. The folder now resting between Daniel and me was a carefully organized chronicle of his betrayal. While he spent spring pretending nothing had happened, I spent mine gathering information, not for revenge, but for self-protection. My lawyer, a meticulous woman named Evelyn Ward, guided me through every step. "If your brother tries to involve you financially in anything," she warned, "you must be prepared. People who forge signatures rarely stop after one attempt." Her words echoed in my mind now, watching Daniel shift uneasily across the bank table. Inside the folder were the forged escrow withdrawal request, the handwriting analysis Evelyn arranged, the phone records linking the request to Daniel's number, a copy of the cautionary legal statement documenting the attempted fraud, or a letter confirming that I should not co-sign any loan for him under any circumstances. The last document was blunt. Given the prior attempted misappropriation of funds, Ms. Delaney must avoid all legal and financial entanglements with her brother to prevent potential liability. I never thought I'd need it. But here we were. Daniel eyed the folder like it contained poison. "What is that?" "Documentation," I said calmly. "Everything I needed in order to understand what happened last spring." His jaw tightened. "You're not bringing that up again. That was a misunderstanding." "No," I said, sliding the forged request toward him. "It was attempted fraud." His nostrils flared. "Are you kidding me? You're going to believe some lawyer over your own brother?" "I'm going to believe signatures, timestamps, and recorded phone numbers." He pushed back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The charm he always relied on wasn't working. "Not this time." "You're overreacting," he muttered. But I wasn't. In fact, I had underreacted for far too long. "This loan you want me to co-sign," I continued, tapping the crisp application he'd handed me, "would make me financially responsible for $60,000. If you default, even once, I would be liable." Daniel leaned forward, voice sharp. "I'm not going to default." "You mean the way you weren't going to forge my name?" The words hit him like a slap, and for a moment, he didn't speak. I quietly added one more document on top of the pile. The advisory note from Evelyn stating that I should decline any financial partnership with Daniel. "What is this?" he asked. "Legal protection." He scoffed bitterly. "You're unbelievable. After everything I've done for you." A laugh, small, disbelieving, escaped my throat. Daniel, what exactly have you done for me? He opened his mouth, closed it, reopened it, but nothing came out. Because he knew. And I knew he knew. The banker returned then, unaware of the storm at the table. Ready to proceed? Daniel shot me a look. Pleading, angry, cornered. And that was when he said it. Maggie, don't do this. I need this loan. I folded my hands, feeling a quiet strength settle into my bones. Then you should have thought about that, I said, before you tried to steal from me. There is a moment, quiet but unmistakable, when a person realizes a door has closed, not with a slam, but with a dignified click. That was the moment Daniel's face shifted from indignation to something sharper, something afraid. I saw it. He felt it. And I knew. The power dynamic had finally changed. You can't be serious, he whispered, eyes wide. You're really not going to sign? I met his stare steadily. No, I'm not. He shook his head, disbelief mingling with panic. This loan is everything, Maggie. I need it to consolidate the business debt. If I don't get this, I'm screwed. I said nothing, letting the weight of his words settle between us. The old version of me, the sister who forgave too quickly, would have folded. She would have blamed herself for his mistakes, tried to rescue him, given him every benefit of the doubt until her own foundation cracked. But she was gone. You still don't get it, I said softly. You didn't just mock my legal bills. You didn't just joke about my divorce. You forged my name on a legal document tied to a federal account. You risked everything I own. He swallowed hard. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. The banker cleared his throat politely. Should I give you both a moment? Daniel waved him off without looking. His voice came out hoarse, almost childlike. Maggie. I was desperate. So was I replied. When I needed help navigating the estate. And you laughed behind my back. That's different. No, I said. It's not. Silence pooled between us. At last, Daniel leaned closer, lowering his voice to a hiss. Fine. You want to punish me. You want to make some point. But think carefully. Families don't recover from this kind of thing. I tilted my head. Families don't survive betrayal, either. He flinched. At that moment, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady, clear. Not angry, not bitter, simply resolved. Before we finish, I said, sliding one final document across the table, I need you to read this. He unfolded it reluctantly, scanning the page. His face tightened. You filed a protective advisory? Against me. I filed documentation, I said. So if you ever try something like the escrow incident again, there will be a record. He stared at me as though seeing a stranger. This isn't you, he whispered. Yes, I said. This is me. This is who I should have been years ago. He closed his eyes, exhaling hard. And then he said the words that told me everything I needed to know. You just ruined my life. I stood up slowly, gathering my purse. No, Daniel, I said. You did that yourself. And as I walked toward the exit, with the loan unsigned, the truth laid bare, and my self-respect finally intact, I didn't look back. He called after me, voice cracking. Maggie, please. But I kept walking. Because I had finally learned that helping someone who chooses deception only enables their downfall, and stepping away lets them face it themselves. 2 months passed before I heard anything concrete about Daniel. I didn't seek updates. They found me through the quiet grapevine of extended family, acquaintances, and people who felt compelled to whisper news they barely understood. It began with a text from my cousin. Is Daniel okay? Heard his business is in trouble. I read it with a calm detachment I never thought I'd possess. Whatever storm Daniel had been outrunning finally caught him. The loan he wanted me to co-sign had been denied. Without the approval, he couldn't merge or consolidate his debts. Suppliers pulled out. A contract he'd been counting on dissolved. Employees left when paychecks grew irregular. The proud small business he'd loved flaunting at family gatherings was buckling under pressure he'd tried so hard to hide. The silence from him was telling. Daniel was never silent unless he was cornered. Then, one chilly morning in late autumn, Elise sent me a message. "Mom, Uncle Daniel's shop officially closed." I drove by. "Everything's gone." I sat at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea, absorbing the finality of it. There was no satisfaction. No thrill. Just inevitability. Daniel had built his life on charm instead of structure, shortcuts instead of accountability. When stability required discipline rather than charisma, there was nothing underneath to hold him up. Later that week, I received a voicemail. His voice sounded different, thin, exhausted, stripped of its usual bravado. "Hey, Maggie. I guess you've heard. Things fell apart. I'm staying at a friend's place for now. Just wanted to let you know." He didn't apologize. Not for the forgery. Not for the mockery. Not for the danger he put me in. He simply wanted me to know he had fallen. I debated calling back. Not to rescue him, those days were gone, but to acknowledge him as a human being, someone I had once loved unquestioningly. But then another voicemail arrived that same evening. "Maggie, you should have helped me. This all happened because you abandoned me. If you just signed that loan." And there it was. The old Daniel. Blame before accountability. I deleted the message. A week later, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. A letter, not from Daniel, but from the bank. Inside was a record of the loan application officially marked withdrawn, accompanied by a note confirming that my name had been flagged to prevent future unauthorized attempts to attach me to any financial commitments connected to him. Evelyn had arranged it quietly, preemptively. I felt protected, seen, respected in a way I hadn't allowed myself to feel for years. Daniel's downfall continued quietly after that. His credit plummeted. 2 creditors sued him. He moved into a rented room outside town. People whispered, but I refused to join the conversation. His consequences were not my revenge. His downfall was not my victory. It was simply the natural ending of a story built on deception. And as winter settled over the town, I realized the final consequence wasn't his at all, it was mine. I had finally reclaimed my peace. Winter has always been my reflective season. The trees bare, the air crisp, the world reduced to essentials. In those months after Daniel's life unraveled, I found myself moving more slowly, not from age, but from intention. I began walking every morning. Long, quiet stretches along the river trail. The peace felt different from the peace I used to chase. This wasn't avoidance or appeasement. This was earned peace. Chosen peace. One morning, Elise joined me. She looped her arm through mine, her breath puffing in the cold. "You know," she said softly, "I'm proud of you." "For what?" "For finally choosing yourself." I smiled. "It only took 62 years. It's never too late." We walked in silence for a moment before she added, "Did you ever think about helping him? After everything fell apart?" I considered that. I thought about calling him. But, no. I didn't consider helping him financially. That wouldn't have been love. It would have been enabling. She nodded. "You taught me something these past few months." "What's that?" "That boundaries aren't punishments. They're protections." Her words warmed me more than the scarf around my neck. I had spent decades believing that to be a good sister, I had to sacrifice my comfort, silence my instincts, and cushion Daniel from the consequences of his behavior. But protecting him had never changed him. It had only harmed me. Now, the quiet of my house felt peaceful, not lonely. The absence of chaos felt like a blessing. I no longer checked my phone anxiously for his demands or his guilt-laced expectations. One evening in early spring, I found a letter slipped into my mailbox. A real letter this time, handwritten, the pen strokes uneven. It was from Daniel. I opened it cautiously, expecting more blame, more excuses. Instead, it read, "Maggie, I've had time to think. I'm angry, but mostly at myself. I know what I did to you wasn't right. I don't know why I did it. I guess I always assumed you'd save me. I'm not asking you to. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I don't expect you to write back." I sat with the letter for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't rejoice. I simply absorbed it. It wasn't accountability, not fully. But it was a beginning. I didn't respond. Not out of cruelty but out of acceptance. His apology was his step, not mine to complete for him. I placed the letter gently inside the same folder that had once held evidence of his betrayal. Not as a contradiction. As closure. And as I closed the drawer, I felt an unmistakable sense of arrival, as though I had finally stepped fully into the life I was always meant to live. Steady, self-trusting, and free. Looking back now, over the long stretch of months and miles of emotional terrain, I see the story not as one of revenge, but of correction, of realignment. My brother's downfall wasn't orchestrated by me. It unfolded naturally when I stepped away from protecting him. And that is the truth I want to leave with anyone who hears my story. Sometimes, the most powerful form of justice is simply refusing to participate in someone else's destruction. Sometimes, the kindest form of love is stepping back and allowing consequences to teach the lessons you never could. And sometimes, the greatest act of self-respect is saying no, calmly, clearly, without apology. People often mistake boundaries for cruelty. They mistake silence for abandonment. But boundaries are bridges to healthier futures, not walls meant to imprison the past. In choosing not to co-sign that loan, I wasn't punishing Daniel. I was honoring myself. I was honoring the truth. I was honoring the life I had worked hard to build after loss. And though my brother and I are not close now, though our conversations are polite rather than intimate, I hold no bitterness. Only understanding. You cannot save someone who refuses to stand on their own feet. You cannot fix a pattern someone is determined to repeat. But you can protect yourself. And you can walk away with dignity. If there is a moral to this story, it is this. When someone mocks your struggle, downplays your pain, or abuses your trust, believe them. And when they return asking for access to your stability, your resources, or your peace, remember the strength it took to survive their absence. Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, "No more." And that whisper can change the entire course of your life.